Okay, hi everyone. My name is Vincent. I'm a PhD student in Nanzan University, Japan, and today I'm going to present to you how I'm using org notes and org roam to write academic papers. The slides I'm going to present here are available in the Git repository, so you can check them later if you want to. So firstly, what are we talking about here? So in general, it's possible if you have any org notes to export them as LaTeX, and given some extra configuration, it's possible basically to reproduce any LaTeX setup that you would use to create documents with an org file. So in my case, I'm using that system to take some notes that I have in my org roam system and to export that into finished academic paper that you can submit eventually to a conference and so on. Actually, before I submit that proposal, after I submit that proposal, I just noticed that Mike Emmerich in last year EmacsConf made a very extensive presentation about org export. But in here, I just want to showcase my usage of org roam and to present what are the configuration I'm using to be able to achieve that. Why I do that? So in general, like I said, I'm using that as part of my writing system. So in having a org roam notes that can be exported as a document make for a great workflow, in my opinion. It makes the org even more versatile. So if you use that for maybe writing code in the literate programming, you're going to be also able to export that into any format you want. Like the org notes are very clean, so in my opinion, it looks better to work in org rather than editing LaTeX code directly. The centralized bibliography system is also great because it allows to have just a few notes that you can reference everywhere and have links to them. And of course, everything is happening inside of Emacs, so you have access to all the tools you are used to, like Magit or Projectile and whatnot. However, and to quote one of the funniest recent video about Emacs, so with LaTeX, I used to spend hours trying to get the image on the right page. Now I use org mode LaTeX and just accept it's impossible. And like all the jokes in that video, it lands in very well because like there is some truth to that. In that, with that system, you are not getting rid of the complexity of LaTeX. So if you have problems, you're still gonna have to deal with the very long logs. It's a layer on top of LaTeX. So if you need to debug your configuration, or if you want to adjust something specific, you would need to be proficient in LaTeX and also in being very at ease with your Emacs configuration. The way to use the org export is less documented than using LaTeX. So if you want to implement something, probably it's going to be described in pure LaTeX, and then you're going to need to adjust that to make it work inside your org files. And I explained before that the bibliography system is great, but although it's very picky on the way it works, especially to be exported, and depending on the template you are using, you might run into issues with some packages that are in conflict. So there is that to be taken in mind. So in general, if you have a org note, you can simply export it with a Ctrl-C, Ctrl-E, and LO with the menu that appears. I can show that briefly. C, Ctrl-E. Then you have the menu. You can select L and O to export the file. And that works very well. In general, with that, you are able to deal with everything that you have in your normal org notes. Like if you have images, table, links, it's going to be exported in a way that looks decent. That's what we are starting with. However, if you want to make a publication, if you have a template that you receive from a conference or whatnot, you want to be able to adapt your org note to be able to export it exactly the way you want. So I'm going to present the 4 points that I'm showing here that are, for me, the elements that you need to be careful with when you try to work with templates and exporting to LaTeX. So firstly, you have headers. So basically, these allows to add LaTeX elements that's going to be at the top of the file. You're going to have the title, you're going to have your extra packages here, you're going to have your class. I'm going to present that later, and that's the part that you're going to adjust to make it look like the text template that you receive. Then you have the formatting class file. That's a CLS file that you would receive, also part of the template. This one is used instead of the typical doc class like article. And the way I'm using them is to add an entry, like add an element to the list or LaTeX class in my Emacs init. This way I can use the CLS file directly and also give the parameters that I want. So in that case, I'm going to have a apris.cls next to my org note, and it's going to be able to use it. A third element is in some case, you might want to use a different LaTeX compiler to build your project, to build your notes, and that can be done per file, per note. In my opinion, that's the most flexible way, by adding this line as the very first line of your file and thus changing the LaTeX PDF process variable. And in there you can put multiple commands in a row. So for example, you can have the shell escape to have the minted note block, the bibtex element. So that worked very well. When you add that, you need to reload your file though, something to keep in mind. And lastly, you have the bibliography. So when you have reference, when you want to put reference, you can use the org-rom bibtex package that need to be installed. Then you have some configuration to be set. So you have the bibtex completion bibliography where you explain where is your reference file, so your bib file. You can also give a path for where to search for PDFs. So if you have matching names with your bibtex entries and some PDF files in there, they're going to be linked. I'm going to show that later. So that's something that's going to be part of your init configuration as part of the org-rom bibtex package configuration. Then in the note you are exporting, you want to add a section called reference. Here you can set a style for the bibliography, and also again you put which of the reference file you want to use. So with all of that, I'm gonna show some example. So here I have an org note that I used as the file to be exported into a publication. So you can see up front I set all my headers package. Like I have some extra package I put. I have the class that is something that is next to it. So you can see in the files, I have the apris.cls just here. And also with all of that, so you can also add tags. I didn't explain that, but you can also like ignore some section, and that's quite convenient as well. So here we have some section, and if you want to add a bibliography, so you're gonna do cl site. You can put some site entry, put any file in there, no description, and you're gonna put you some link like that. And that's very convenient because firstly, it's gonna be exported as a reference, like you're gonna show later, but also it gives you access to it directly from the note. So if I click the thing here, I have some menu. I can open the bibliography page. Sorry. And I can also open the PDF that was linked to it. So if I do that, here is the file that pops up that was linked to the bibliography. That's great. And otherwise, yeah, in that document, you're gonna have other things. You can have figures with parameters set on top, footnotes as well, if that's something that you need. For example, here, it's a section that's not exported, but you can have your normal footnotes. We can go back and forth, and if they are in the exported section, they're gonna be managed. So with that, you can export the notes. So you're gonna see Control-C, Control-E. So you have that menu for exporting org files. You do L for LaTeX, and then O for running directly as PDF and opening it. It takes a little while to build, and here we are. So you have the template have been used. So there is a 2: situation happening. We have a specific header format and figures, and the citation that we put, it's happening, it's showed here, and it's also going to be visible at the end in the reference section. So yeah, like I say, a fully ready, like finished paper can be produced this way. And yeah, that's all that I had for today. Thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, I am available for question on IRC or in the video chat. Thank you.